Here is something your cardiologist probably never told you at your last checkup, and I want you to hear this clearly because what I am about to share has completely changed the way I think about hydration, circulation, and aging. My name is Dr. William Lee. I have been practicing medicine and researching the science of human health for over 3 decades, and I can tell you honestly that some of the most important discoveries I have made in my career have not come from expensive clinical trials or cutting-edge laboratories. They have come from paying close attention to patterns in my patients, from asking the questions that most doctors simply do not have time to ask anymore. And one of those questions, a question that changed everything for me, was this: why are so many of my patients over 60 doing everything right and still feeling so wrong? They were taking their medications, they were watching what they ate. Some of them were exercising regularly, and yet they were exhausted. Their blood pressure was stubborn, their hands and feet were cold, their thinking felt slower than it used to, they were aging faster than they should have been, and when they came to me and described these symptoms, most of them had already been told the same thing by multiple doctors. This is just part of getting older. There is not much more we can do. I refused to accept that answer. And I am glad I did. Because what I discovered over years of research and clinical observation is that one of the most powerful levers we have for cardiovascular health after 60 is something so simple, so accessible, and so completely overlooked that most physicians never even think to mention it. It is not a new medication. It is not a supplement that costs $100 a month. It starts with water, but not the way you have been drinking it. After 60, the way your body processes water changes dramatically. Not slightly, dramatically. Your blood thickens. Your blood vessels lose their elasticity. The smooth muscle that lines your arteries becomes stiffer and less responsive. And nitric oxide, the molecule that your endothelium produces to keep your blood vessels open, relaxed, and freely flowing, drops to a fraction of what it was when you were 40. Some studies suggest that nitric oxide availability in adults over 60 can be as much as 50% lower than in younger adults. Half. Gone. And with it goes much of your body's natural ability to regulate blood pressure, maintain circulation to your extremities, and keep your brain properly perfused. Plain water simply cannot fix this, and in a few minutes, I am going to tell you exactly what can. But first, let me tell you about a patient I will call Robert. He was 71 years old, a retired engineer, and he was one of the most disciplined patients I have ever had. He tracked everything. He knew his blood pressure readings, his cholesterol numbers, his resting heart rate. He was on 2 blood pressure medications, and he took them without fail. He ate a Mediterranean diet. He walked every morning, and yet Robert felt terrible. His feet were so cold at night that his wife had started sleeping on the other side of the bed. He had a mental fog that he described as trying to think through wet concrete. And perhaps most distressing to him was that his blood pressure, despite 2 medications and a near-perfect lifestyle, simply would not come down to where it needed to be. He had seen a cardiologist who adjusted his medications, a neurologist who ran tests and found nothing remarkable, an internist who told him his labs looked acceptable. Nobody could explain why a man doing almost everything right was still struggling so significantly. When Robert came to see me, I did what I always do with patients like him. I slowed down. I asked him to walk me through an entire typical day in detail. What he ate, when he ate it, what he drank, when he moved, how he slept. I was not looking for the dramatic things. I was looking for the quiet things, the invisible habits that add up over years and either protect us or quietly destroy us. And when we got to hydration, something caught my attention immediately. Robert was drinking 6 to 7 glasses of water every day. By any conventional standard, he was well hydrated, but he was drinking plain water. Filtered, clean, perfectly good plain water. And for a man of 71, plain water was simply not doing the job at the cellular level where it actually needed to work. Let me explain exactly what I mean, because this is the foundation of everything I am going to share with you today. When you swallow a glass of water, most people imagine it flowing through their body like water through a pipe, hydrating everything it touches. But that is not how it works, not even close. Water has to pass through your digestive system, get absorbed through the wall of your small intestine, enter your bloodstream, travel to your tissues, and then actually cross the membrane of each individual cell. That last step, getting water from the fluid surrounding your cells into the cells themselves, is where the entire process breaks down in people over 60. Your cell membranes contain specialized protein channels called aquaporins. These are essentially molecular doorways that allow water to pass in and out of cells in a controlled and efficient manner. In a young, healthy body, these channels are abundant, well-functioning, and highly responsive. Water moves freely, cells stay properly hydrated, everything works. But beginning in our 50s and accelerating through our 60s and beyond, aquaporin expression and function declines. Research published in journals studying cellular aging has documented this reduction clearly. The doorways become fewer, they become less responsive, And the result is that water you drink is far less able to actually enter your cells than it was 20 or 30 years ago. This is why you can be a person who drinks water faithfully all day long and still be experiencing the systemic effects of cellular dehydration, fatigue that sleep does not fix, joints that ache more than they should, skin that has lost its resilience, digestion that is slowed, and blood, and this is the cardiovascular piece, blood that is thicker and more viscous than it needs to be. Because here is the truth about blood viscosity that most people never hear. The thickness of your blood is not fixed. It is not simply genetic destiny. It responds to your hydration status, your mineral balance, your inflammation levels, and your vascular health. And when your blood is thicker than it should be, every single aspect of your cardiovascular system suffers. Your heart has to generate more pressure to move it. Your smaller vessels, the capillaries that supply your brain, your kidneys, your extremities, become harder to perfuse. The turbulence in your larger vessels increases, which damages the endothelial lining. And your risk of clot formation, which is what causes most heart attacks and strokes, goes up. Thinning the blood naturally, not with pharmaceutical blood thinners, but through proper hydration and mineral balance, is one of the most powerful things you can do for your cardiovascular health. And it begins with understanding what plain water cannot do and what mineral-rich water can. Your blood is not pure water. It is a complex, precisely balanced solution. It contains sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, bicarbonate, phosphate, proteins, and dozens of other substances in carefully maintained concentrations. The relationship between the concentration of these dissolved substances and the amount of water present determines something called osmolality, essentially how thick or thin your blood and cellular fluids are. When you drink plain water, you temporarily dilute your blood's osmolality. Your body responds by activating hormonal signals, primarily antidiuretic hormone and the renin-angiotensin system, to restore balance. Part of how it restores that balance is by excreting excess water through your kidneys. This is why drinking large amounts of plain water does not simply translate into better hydration. Much of it is eliminated before your cells can effectively absorb it. But when you drink water that already contains the right electrolytes in physiologically appropriate concentrations, something fundamentally different happens. The osmotic gradient across your cell membranes becomes more favorable for cellular uptake. Your kidneys do not need to work as hard to restore balance. More of the water you drink actually reaches the cells that need it, and the electrolytes themselves, particularly magnesium, begin doing their own extraordinary work on your cardiovascular system. Magnesium. I want to spend real time on this mineral because it is, in my clinical experience and in the research literature, the single most underappreciated nutrient for cardiovascular health in adults over 60. The statistics on magnesium deficiency in older adults are genuinely alarming. Multiple large population studies have found that somewhere between 60 and 80% of adults over 60 have dietary magnesium intakes below the recommended levels. And dietary intake is only part of the picture. Aging also reduces magnesium absorption in the gut and increases excretion through the kidneys, meaning that even people eating magnesium-rich foods may not be maintaining adequate cellular levels. And the standard blood test for magnesium, serum magnesium, measures only the magnesium circulating in your bloodstream, which represents less than 1% of your body's total magnesium. The other 99% is inside your cells and stored in your bones. A normal serum magnesium level tells you almost nothing about whether your cells have adequate magnesium. This is one of the great blind spots of routine medical care. So what does magnesium actually do for your blood vessels and your circulation? Let me walk you through this carefully because each mechanism is important and they build on each other. The first mechanism is vascular smooth muscle relaxation. Your blood vessels are not rigid tubes. They are living structures wrapped in layers of smooth muscle that contract and relax continuously in response to nerve signals, hormones, and local chemical messengers. When that smooth muscle contracts excessively, which is what happens in hypertension, your vessels narrow and your blood pressure rises. Magnesium is a physiological calcium antagonist. Inside smooth muscle cells, calcium is the trigger for contraction. When calcium floods into these cells, the muscle contracts and the vessel narrows. Magnesium competes with calcium at the cellular level, essentially acting as a natural brake on this contraction process. It keeps your blood vessels in a more relaxed, dilated state. This is the exact mechanism exploited by the class of pharmaceutical drugs called calcium channel blockers, drugs like amlodipine, which are among the most widely prescribed blood pressure medications in the world. Magnesium does something functionally similar, naturally, and without the side effects of ankle swelling and fatigue that many patients experience with pharmaceutical calcium channel blockers. The second mechanism involves nitric oxide. I mentioned earlier that nitric oxide production declines dramatically after 60. What I want to add now is that magnesium is one of the essential cofactors for the enzyme that makes nitric oxide, endothelial nitric oxide synthase. Without adequate magnesium, this enzyme cannot function at full capacity, regardless of how much of its other precursors you have available. This is one of the reasons that magnesium repletion has been shown in clinical studies to improve endothelial function and increase nitric oxide bioavailability. You are essentially giving your body the raw material it needs to rebuild one of its most important vascular protective mechanisms. The third mechanism is anti-inflammatory. Chronic low-grade inflammation is a driving force behind arterial stiffness, endothelial dysfunction, and atherosclerosis. And magnesium deficiency is directly pro-inflammatory. It activates inflammatory signaling pathways and increases levels of C-reactive protein, interleukin-6, and other inflammatory markers that predict cardiovascular events. Restoring adequate magnesium levels reduces this inflammatory burden measurably. Multiple clinical trials have documented decreases in inflammatory markers following magnesium supplementation in deficient individuals. The fourth mechanism relates to insulin sensitivity and blood sugar regulation. This connection surprises many people, but the link between metabolic health and cardiovascular health is inseparable. Magnesium is required for the proper function of insulin receptors on your cells. When magnesium is deficient, insulin signaling becomes impaired. Your cells become less responsive to insulin, blood sugar rises, and the cascade of vascular damage that follows elevated blood sugar begins. Restoring magnesium has been shown in randomized controlled trials to meaningfully improve insulin sensitivity in people with magnesium deficiency. So how do you actually get more magnesium into your system through your water? The most practical approach, and the one I recommend to my patients, uses 3 ingredients. The first is magnesium itself. The form matters significantly. Magnesium oxide, which is found in many cheap supplements, is poorly absorbed. Studies suggest absorption rates as low as 4%. Far better options are magnesium glycinate, which is highly bioavailable and gentle on the digestive system, magnesium malate, which has additional benefits for energy production, or magnesium chloride, which dissolves easily in water and is efficiently absorbed. A small amount, typically 100 to 200 milligrams, dissolved in your morning water is a practical starting point. Always speak with your doctor about the right amount for your individual situation, particularly if you have kidney disease. The second ingredient is a small pinch, and I mean a small pinch, not a large one, of high-quality sea salt or Himalayan pink salt. Not because sodium is something most older adults need more of in general, but because natural salt contains a spectrum of trace minerals, potassium, calcium, zinc, selenium, and dozens of others, in ratios that closely approximate what your blood and cellular fluids actually need. This trace mineral profile creates a more physiologically complete electrolyte solution that your body can work with more efficiently than plain water with magnesium alone. The third ingredient is fresh lemon juice, specifically the juice of half a fresh lemon, and I want to explain why this is more than just flavoring. Lemon juice is rich in citric acid, which in your body becomes citrate. Citrate is a powerful mineral chelator. It binds to magnesium and other minerals and dramatically enhances their absorption through your intestinal wall. Research has consistently shown that mineral citrate forms have significantly higher bioavailability than other mineral salts. By adding lemon juice to your mineral water, you are essentially creating the optimal delivery system for the magnesium and trace minerals you have just added. You are not just making the water taste better, you are making it work better. These 3 ingredients together, magnesium, trace minerals from natural salt, and citrate from lemon, create what I now call functional hydration water. Water that your aging body can actually use at the cellular level. Water that begins shifting your blood viscosity, your vascular tone, and your cardiovascular chemistry within hours of drinking it. Drink 16 ounces of this every morning before anything else. Before coffee, before food, before you look at your phone. This is the single most important hydration habit you can build after 60. Now let me build on this foundation because there are additional strategies that amplify these effects significantly. The second strategy involves something called dietary nitrates, and understanding this will change how you look at certain foods forever. Your body produces nitric oxide through 2 pathways. The first is the enzymatic pathway I described, endothelial nitric oxide synthase converting an amino acid called L-arginine into nitric oxide. The second pathway, which becomes increasingly important as the first pathway declines with age, is the dietary nitrate pathway. When you eat foods high in nitrates, bacteria on your tongue convert those nitrates to nitrites. Your stomach acid then converts nitrites to nitric oxide. This is a completely separate and parallel production system, and it does not depend on the aging enzyme that is losing efficiency. It depends on what you eat. The richest dietary sources of nitrates are beetroot, arugula, spinach, celery, and Swiss chard. Beetroot in particular has been the subject of extensive cardiovascular research. A landmark study from the Baker Heart Institute showed that drinking a single glass of beetroot juice lowered blood pressure in healthy adults by an average of 5 points, a reduction comparable to some blood pressure medications. Subsequent studies have replicated and extended these findings across populations of older adults, patients with hypertension, and individuals with peripheral arterial disease. I now recommend to my patients over 60 that they incorporate beetroot into their diet in some form every single day. Fresh beetroot, cooked beetroot, beetroot juice, or beetroot powder mixed into their morning mineral water. The effect is cumulative. The more consistently you consume it, the more sustained the elevation of nitric oxide, and the more meaningful the cardiovascular benefit. One important warning that I want to flag for you right now. If you use mouthwash regularly, and many people do, you may be eliminating much of this benefit. Antibacterial mouthwash kills the bacteria on your tongue that are responsible for converting dietary nitrates to nitrites. Studies have shown that using antibacterial mouthwash twice daily can effectively block the dietary nitrate pathway to nitric oxide almost entirely. I am not telling you to stop caring for your oral health, but I am telling you that the timing and type of oral hygiene products you use matter for cardiovascular health in a way that nobody ever discusses. The third strategy is one that I personally consider among the most exciting developments in the science of vascular aging. It involves a compound called spermidine. I know the name is unusual, but stay with me, because the research behind this molecule is remarkable. Spermidine is a naturally occurring polyamine found in significant concentrations in wheat germ, aged cheeses, mushrooms, soy products, and certain legumes. And what it does inside your cells is trigger a process called autophagy, essentially cellular self-cleaning. Your cells break down and recycle damaged proteins and dysfunctional organelles, replacing them with new, healthy components. In your blood vessels specifically, autophagy is critical for maintaining the health and function of endothelial cells. As we age, cellular waste accumulates in our vessel walls. Damaged proteins and lipids build up. Autophagy clears this accumulation, and research, including studies in human subjects, has shown that higher spermidine intake is associated with lower blood pressure, better arterial elasticity, and reduced cardiovascular mortality. One large observational study found that people with the highest dietary spermidine intake had cardiovascular disease rates comparable to people who were 10 years younger. 10 years younger. Just from dietary intake of a compound that most people have never heard of. Wheat germ is by far the richest dietary source of spermidine, and it is easy to incorporate into your daily routine. 2 tablespoons mixed into yogurt, oatmeal, or a smoothie gives you a meaningful dose. Spermidine supplements are also available, and the clinical research on them is increasingly compelling. The fourth strategy I want to discuss concerns something that most people think of as purely a beverage preference rather than a cardiovascular intervention. I am talking about green tea, specifically the catechins it contains, and most particularly a compound called EGCG, epigallocatechin gallate. EGCG is one of the most extensively studied plant compounds in cardiovascular medicine. Its effects on vascular health are multifaceted and well documented. It is a potent antioxidant that specifically protects nitric oxide from being degraded by oxidative stress, meaning it does not just support nitric oxide production, it protects the nitric oxide that your body has already made. It inhibits the enzymes that break down nitric oxide before it can do its job. It reduces inflammation in endothelial cells, and it has been shown to improve endothelium-dependent vasodilation, the ability of your blood vessels to relax and widen in response to increased blood flow. In multiple randomized controlled trials, 2 to 3 cups of high-quality green tea per day, consumed between meals for optimal absorption, is one of the simplest and most evidence-backed habits for vascular health after 60 that I know of. If you do not enjoy the taste, matcha, powdered green tea, has an even higher concentration of EGCG and can be prepared as a latte with a plant-based milk in a way that many of my patients find genuinely enjoyable. Now I want to spend a few minutes on something that is not about what you drink, but about when and how you move. Because hydration and circulation are inseparable from physical activity, and there is one specific type of movement that the research has identified as uniquely powerful for vascular health in older adults. It is not high-intensity exercise. It is not weightlifting, though both of those have their place. It is Zone 2 cardio, sustained, moderate-intensity aerobic exercise that keeps your heart rate at approximately 60 to 70% of your maximum for an extended period. Walking briskly, cycling at a comfortable pace, swimming, dancing. Activities that make you breathe harder but still allow you to carry on a conversation. Zone 2 cardio is the primary stimulus for something called angiogenesis, the growth of new blood vessels. As we age, the density of our capillary networks, the tiny vessels that supply oxygen and nutrients to every tissue in our body, naturally decreases. Zone 2, exercise, reverses this. It stimulates the growth of new capillaries in your heart muscle, your skeletal muscles, and your brain. It reduces arterial stiffness. It lowers resting blood pressure. And it upregulates the production of endothelial nitric oxide synthase, the very enzyme whose declining activity is one of our central problems. 30 minutes of Zone 2 cardio 5 days a week, combined with the hydration strategies I have described, creates a synergistic effect on cardiovascular health that is more powerful than either intervention alone. I have watched this combination transform patients who had been told they were simply aging normally and there was nothing to be done. Robert, by the way, added a daily morning walk to his mineral water routine at my suggestion. At his 3-month follow-up, his cardiologist, not me, his cardiologist, called to ask what had changed, because his arterial stiffness measurements had improved in a way that his medications had never achieved. His feet were warm, his fog had cleared, and he was considering, for the first time in 3 years, planning a hiking trip with his grandchildren. That is not magic, that is physiology. That is what happens when you give an aging body what it actually needs, instead of just managing the symptoms of what it lacks. I want to close by saying something that I believe with my whole heart after everything I have seen in 30 years of practice. We have built a medical system that is extraordinarily good at crisis intervention and disease management. If you have a heart attack, we can save your life in ways that would have seemed miraculous to physicians of previous generations. But we are far less good at the daily, quiet, cumulative work of protecting the vascular system before the crisis arrives. That work falls to you, and it is far more within your reach than most people realize. The glass of mineral water you drink every morning, the beetroot you add to your lunch, the walk you take after dinner, the green tea you sip in the afternoon instead of reaching for another coffee. These are not small things. They are the daily choices through which your blood vessels either age gracefully or deteriorate faster than they should. You are not powerless against the passage of time. You are, in fact, remarkably powerful, and the science to support that power exists, is rigorous, and is available to anyone willing to look for it. I am Dr. William Lee. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If what I have shared resonates with you, please pass it along to someone you love who is over 60. Because the conversation your cardiologist does not have time to have with you in a 15-minute appointment might be the one that changes the trajectory of the next 20 years of your life. Take care of your vessels. Take care of your blood. Take care of the extraordinary, resilient, healable body that carries everything you are.